This is what we're going to create, a pop-up menu that exists on the stage timeline. There's some advantages to that where we can have a separate animation for every menu that it changes. So within this block is the animation that's within the red. Over here it's the same animation that's within the green. And at the end of the second movie, I'll show you how you can make some modifications to this. But for now, this is how this works. The idea is that you click on the pop-up menu. This takes you to that section. And of course, all of these are individual buttons that you can go into and modify or replace with other artwork as a movie clip. If you decide you don't want to go anywhere, if you click on the black again, it takes you back to the home menu. So that's the setup. We'll take a look at how to create it in this next section. So the first thing I want to do in this movie is just set up the artwork that I'm going to be using. The artwork is fairly generic, and hopefully you'll be able to figure out how to use it in your own documents. So we'll start off with HTML5 Canvas. I'm going to leave everything as default settings. The one thing I am going to change is going to be the frames per second. Just makes the math a little bit easier to see what's going on. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. So I'm going to reset my foreground and background color, reverse it out. I want to start off with a black square. I don't want a stroke, so I'll go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to select my rectangle tool and I'm going to hold the Option key down. And for this exercise, if you actually wanted to make this with a circle, it would still work, or whatever dimensions you want. So I've already tested this out in the last trial run, so everything works the way it's supposed to work. So that's why it's remembering the last settings. And in my example, I'm using 200 by 50. It's going to kind of reflect the idea of a generic pop-up menu. Okay, so I'm going to want red, green, and blue. This is just going to phase through color choices. So this is going to be blue. This is going to be green. This is going to be red. Okay, now I want to convert them into buttons, and I'm doing this backwards. Instead of starting on the top and working my way down, I'm starting off in here to create my button because I'm going to distribute them, and Animate always remembers the last thing that was created moves to the highest level. And so I don't want the blue button to be on the top layer. I want it to be on the bottom layer. That's why I'm creating it first. So I'm going to do an F8 there, and I'm going to change the name of the button to symbol capital B. Make sure that you've got buttons selected. That way you get the Mickey Mouse glove when you roll over. And make sure that you're on the upper left-hand corner. This isn't really that critical, but it makes life a little bit easier for alignment. We'll go ahead and hit OK. All right, so we'll go to the next one up, F8, and this one becomes green, and everything's remembered from the last setting, so that's correct. Click on this one over here, another F8. This one becomes red. Hit OK. And then this one in here would be B for black, but we're already using B for blue, so we're just going to use K, as in CMYK, for black. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. All right, so now I'm going to line them up. I'll line them up with my alignment tool. I'll center them up, and I'll put them over here. And I want to have them show up the way the menu would look when it pops open. There's no reason why these can't open up horizontally. The idea is that it's just the mechanics in here that we're setting up. So if this was set up horizontally, that would work. If these were coming off a page, that would work. But for now, we're just doing a conventional looking button so that we kind of figure out how to set up the mechanics here. So we'll select all, Command-Shift-D. That puts all my buttons in their own layers. And you can see symbol K, red, green, and blue are starting off. And the last thing I want to do is make sure I've got instance names for these. So the top one is going to be K underscore BTN. The red one is going to be R underscore BTN. And green underscore BTN. And finally blue underscore BTN. Okay, so whoops, my mouse is slippery here, so let me do a command 1. There we go. Alright, so everything looks like I'm checking over here, making sure I typed in the right names over here, up in here, and everything looks good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to rename the original layer, call it Actions. You want to do that because we're going to be using code snippets, and if you accidentally start putting code in here and then start using the code snippets, if code snippets don't see the actions layer, it'll create a new layer, and then you're going to have multiple action layers. The other thing you want to do with an action layer is you want to lock it. That way you don't accidentally start putting in artwork in there. Okay, so now I'm ready to start animating this, so I'll select everything here, and I'll go to the Insert drop-down menu, and I'm going to use Classic Tween. It's a little easier to work with in relationship to being able to do ease in and ease outs. If you want to make a regular motion tween, there will be some changes that you'd have to consider in terms of how you're doing the animation, but I think you might be able to figure out what the differences are. But if not, just stick with Classic Tween. It's really the easiest way to go. Alright, so now that I've created those into animations, I'm going to hold the Option key or Alt key down, and I'm going to click here and drag it over to frame 11. And if you remember, there is no zero frame in the timeline, but there is in JavaScript, so we have to compensate for that. So frame 1 is actually frame 0, and frame 11 is actually frame 10. And so now I'll go back over here to the first keyframe. I'll select all my artwork, and I'll go ahead and collapse these so that they all crunch together. And so that's the setup. The animation just opens and closes. And now I need the animation to be continuous because I want it to open, and then as the playhead moves along, I want it to close. So I need a copy of these frames. I'm clicking without letting go, dragging straight down. Now I'm going to hold the Option or Alt key, and I'm going to make a copy over here at frame 21. And so here's my animation. It just opens and closes. And if we run this, you can kind of take a look at what's going on with the animation. It's just opening and collapsing. Okay, so let me move this out of the way here so it doesn't get in the way all the time I open it up. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to extend the timeline. And it's convenient that the second mark, 30 seconds, is right here. And I'm going to use that as a reference to where I start the next section. So we're going to have a home scene here, or a home page type of thing. It's actually going to be frame 1 that's going to be the home location. And then over here at frame 30 will be the location for red. And then at 60 will be for green, and for 90 would be blue. And so it's convenient that the 1, 2, and 3 kind of line that up. We're not actually animating the locations. We're going to jump right to them. So what's going to happen is that you're going to click on your pop-up menu. It opens this up, and then when you click on red, for example, it would then finish the animation, and from here it would jump to the red section here. And then it would display the red text in here to let us know that we arrived on that frame. So to make it easy, I'm going to extend this timeline right before frame 30. So I'm just clicking and dragging like that, and I'm going to do an F5, just like that. Now, I could stop in here, but just so that you understand what's going on visually, I'm going to select these layers. I'm clicking and dragging across, and I'm going to get rid of the animation in here, remove the tween. That's just so we can see this rhythmic pattern. So it's going to go animate, nothing. And now we want to start it again over here on frame 30. So I'm going to click and drag over here, and I'm going to drag this over here with the Option key down, and now I've made a copy. So you can start to see the pattern. Animation, nothing happens. I'll do the same thing over here at frame 60. So I'll hold the Option key down, drag this to frame 60, and it's right lining up with frame 60. And I'm going to do it again, Option key, and drag this down to frame 90. Now you can see that the animation always goes to one shy of the number that's divisible by 10. And over here on the back end, it's doing that as well. So here it's one shy that I want it to be. And so I need to increase this by one frame. So I'm just clicking and dragging one column of the last frames here. And I'm going to go ahead and do an F5, and you'll see that that extends it by one. So that way everything is even, and there's no confusion into how everything is set up. So now I want to set up my artwork, and I'm going to create a new layer, and this layer goes to the bottom. Generally, you always want to keep all your navigational buttons on the top layer so that you can get to them. This isn't really going to be in the way, but just out of habit, I'll go ahead and put it on the bottom. And so I'll just go ahead and call this art for now. You can call it whatever you want. So in here, I'm going to create a text box, and that's just going to tell me where I am. And so in the first text box, my text is going to be black, and it's going to say home. And right now my text box is generically set up for the sans serif typeface. Keep it that way for now if you're just doing this as a test. Otherwise, in this layer is where you're going to actually bring in your artwork. So you could totally ignore this art layer part of the tutorial. Okay, so now I'm going to work over here. I'm going to do an F6 here, an F6 here, an F6 here, and now I'll go back over here and change the text. So this is going to be, first one is going to be red, and I'll go ahead and change the color to red. Next one over here is going to be green, and I'll change the color to green. And then finally blue, change the color to blue. Okay, so I've got everything set up. The next thing in the next movie, we'll start setting up our coding part of it. So again, this is going to pop open, and when you click, for example, let's say you click on blue, the playhead's going to chug along. It's going to collapse the code, and at this point in here, we'll throw in a keyframe, and this keyframe is going to contain code that's going to send it over to the blue section, and it's going to land over here, and it's going to stop there. So we're going to label and bring in our code to navigate this movie.